Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape Podcast. Hosted by Dr. Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. The show highlights SCER's role supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development for the state of Wyoming.
So today, I'm really excited to host several folks involved in different capacities with the School of Energy Resources academic program. We're going to talk today about how our board that oversees that program and industry around the state and beyond interact with our School of Energy Resources students, including our student club, and how we work to elevate the experience of our students while we're here having the honor to offer them the education at the University of Wyoming and prepare them for careers in the energy sector. So I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves. Welcome, Kendall, Jake, and Fred. Kendall, let's start with you. Can you tell our audience about your background and how you came here to be here at the School of Energy Resources?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Holly. Yeah, so my name is Kendall. I'm a senior in the Professional Land Management program in the School of Energy Resources. And I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. And so my first common question I always get when I tell people that I'm from Chicago is, how did I land at the University of Wyoming? And that's for the program. If I knew I wanted to major in something energy and didn't realize how specific it was, and landed at UW. And I originally started in the other concentration, the Energy and Environmental Systems one, but then took one PLM class and then switched over my freshman year. But yeah, I'm also the president of the student chapter of Energy Resources and have been involved with that since my freshman year. But yeah, I absolutely love UW and I would pick it over and over again.
Great. Thank you. And Jake, welcome. Can you introduce yourself and give a little bit about your background and your engagement with the School of Energy Resources?
Yeah, thanks, Holly, and thanks for having me. My name's Jake Haseman. I am a shareholder and energy attorney at Beatty and Wozniak, located in the Sheridan, Wyoming office. I've practiced law primarily in the field of energy and federal lands since late 2007. Originally was a honors trial attorney at the Department of Justice's Environment and Natural Resources Division in Washington, D.C., and then shortly thereafter entered private practice where I've represented industry across the energy spectrum, largely on a regulatory basis, working with the state oil and gas commissions and the federal government, largely the Bureau of Land Management. Been involved with the PLM program since its inception, so seen it come from a very small organic start to the large beast that keeps moving forward that we see today. And also am a University of Wyoming College of Law grad, so definitely support Wyoming and my state and university, as well as our energy industry, which powers the state.
Thanks so much, Jake. And we love our acronyms here at the School of Energy Resources. So just a reminder that PLM stands for Professional Land Management, and it's one of our two concentrations here at the School of Energy Resources for our undergraduate degree, which is Energy Resource Management and Development. So throughout the rest of the episode, we might throw out PLM. Everybody knows what that is. So last but definitely not least, Fred, welcome to the program. Can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background and your engagement here?
Thanks, Holly, and appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. I kind of took a circuitous route. It took a circle to get here. My background, I'm a Wyoming native, but a military brat and a 14-year Air Force veteran. Ended up graduating out of the first class from the University of Wyoming's PLM program. Unfortunately, I did that in 2015, so I ended up going to work for the federal government for about 2 years. And then during one of my internships as a student, I was with Peabody, and they recruited me back to be the landman. And I mentored with Kendra Quick, who was the senior landman at the time for Peabody. And then as we sit right now, I'm the senior landman for Peabody Energy, responsible for our 3 mines in the Powder River Basin, 1 mine in Colorado, 2 mines in New Mexico, and 1 mine in Arizona. So that kind of lands me where I'm currently at. And then my engagement with the program, aside from being a student, I've been on the board for the Industry Advisory Board for the last 3 years. I think next year is the end of my 4th year term.
Thanks, Fred. So the idea behind this podcast was partly based on your visit, all three of you, when you were in town together at the Rocky Mountain Professional Landman Conference last spring. I love that event because it's student led. I like to joke, well, it's not really a joke, it's a true story, that we were going to do the conference every other year, and the students absolutely would not put up with that. They said, we're doing this as an annual conference and we'll do it without you if you won't have it every year. So we are doing it every year, and it's a great event and really encourage people. It's generally in the April timeframe. So you can always go to the School of Energy Resources website to our list of events and find out what time or what day that conference is each year. So for each of our three panelists today, I'd love to hear from you directly. What do you like best about this student-led annual, and it is annual event? So Kendall, let's start with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess this coming spring will be my fourth year putting this on or being a part of a student group that kind of pushes this forward. And my favorite thing about it each year has been just like the diverse group of people it brings in terms of students and industry professionals. It's a great time for alum to come out, and I've seen anywhere from like PhD students to freshmen coming, and it's great to see the familiar faces of people that I've worked with in the past, people who are on our advisory board, guest speakers from classes, and just meeting new people and forming connections. And I feel like each time that I go to this conference and attend, I always learn something new and I always meet somebody new. So there's probably my biggest takeaways from those. And it's awesome to throw on, and just, it always shocks me when people like show up. Like, I know people are going to show up, but being a student running this, it's always like, I hope people show up, even though we know they will.
That's every conference and every event we run. But I will say our last year was our best attendance so far. I think we had about 140 people that actually showed up. So it continues to grow year by year. So I think the word's getting out. It's a great event. Jake, what about you? What would you say to anyone who's considering attending?
Well, first off, I'd echo what both you and Kendall said, that the students putting it on is excellent, and they do a fantastic job doing it. I've been especially impressed with their ability to identify topics that are super timely in Wyoming and the Rockies, as well as speakers who can concisely discuss what the big issues are on some of these hot topics. And really, that's my favorite thing about the conference. I mean, we take a look at all of these varying aspects of energy in Wyoming and how it affects us in Wyoming, and had things like nuclear, CCUS or carbon capture, along with your traditional oil and gas development. So it's been really great to see a conference that focuses on both our traditional energy industries in Wyoming, as well as some of the new hot topics that are coming up, like CCS, uranium, and nuclear. So that's one of the things that gets me really excited. And I think every year we've seen that these topics just are point on current events, and really provide a lot of great information to professionals and the students.
And Fred, how about you?
Well, Holly, I'd love to say that I got something new to add to that, but I think Kendall and Jake pretty well covered it with the one caveat. The one thing I like to see, it gives those of us that are hiring these students an opportunity to see them in an environment that's not an interview. It's not something that they can actually prepare for, and you get to watch them for 6-7 hours, see how they interact with people, and see if what you've identified during an interview or during that process matches with the way that they project themselves when they're in a more social, business-like environment. So I think that has huge value for those of us that are doing the hiring.
And one thing people might not know who do attend that conference is that all the questions for the panels, those are all at least started. Most of them are prepared by the students, but they're very sophisticated, and we're always, of course, very proud of our students. So, and Kendall, you will be president of the School of Energy Resources Student Club next year. How is your involvement in that program added to your time and your educational experience at UW? And what are you going to do with your degree after? Maybe that's too soon. We're not ready to lose you, by the way. So we're very excited to see you in this leadership role.
Yeah, it's weird entering like my senior year, and as my dad tells me that I'm no longer getting settled into college, but I'm on my way out, which is weird to think about. But yeah, the student chapter of Energy Resources has been huge to my academic career in terms of my hands-on learning. I feel like the events that I attend and help put on, and the people that I meet, are things and people that I like don't get the opportunity just like by sitting in the classroom. And I have this one memory of I think it was my freshman or sophomore year, that we partnered with another club, an engineering club on campus, and we went to do a rig tour. And I learned so much. And even though I will never be on a rig, like doing the manual labor side of things, it was very helpful to see that side and understand that, like, yeah, I can do what I can do as a landman, but there's other people on the other side of that need to do what they do. And so it's all just one big well-oiled machine. And I really appreciate seeing that side. And I don't think that you would get that opportunity as much in the classroom without being involved. And you also get to meet a lot of cool people. Some of my best friends have come out of this program, and I still keep up with them, for those who've graduated and those who have gone away for the summer and whatnot. But yeah, I've made great friends and met a ton of industry connections. And it's so fun to like go to conferences like the Spring Rocky Mountain Professional Landman Conference or AAPL's things, and being able to pick out people that are like, oh, I've met them before, like in this one-on-one experience with this site tour or whatever. But it just kind of gives a leg up to seeing the real world application. And then in terms of what I'm doing with my degree, I'm planning on working in the oil and gas industry. I guess I start my job search here soon, which is super exciting. I'm hoping to go down to Texas probably for a couple years. And then I've always had an interest in federal lands, but Texas wouldn't be the greatest place for that. So who knows where I'll go, but I'm really hoping just to gain a bunch of experience just working under people more on the negotiation side of things.
And Kendall, we have tons of federal lands here in Wyoming, as you know.
Yes.
So we would love to welcome you back after your Texas experience. And one thing that we offer, and also several other colleges at the University of Wyoming offer, is lifelong career services. So if you're looking for a career change later, not just that first job, but after that, the School of Energy Resources will be here to help you, especially if it means we can bring you back to Wyoming. Then we'll be extra motivated. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just talking to my dad, and he had mentioned how that after a couple years or 10, 20 years, like I could go independent. And I totally forgot about that side of the land industry for myself. And maybe Wyoming is a perfect place for that, but who knows?
We do. We have several of our graduates in the last few years who who have gone down that route. So, and
I'd add,
yeah, go ahead, Jake.
Sorry, Holly. I'd add quick too, just to tag on to both you guys. One of the very unique things about the University of Wyoming generally and the industry is that, we have this program that really collects a lot of the young industry and energy professionals together. And you'll find in Wyoming that you will continue to see the people that you graduated with or were in classes adjacent to you in your careers and practice, which I have found very valuable as an attorney in Wyoming and as an attorney who works with landmen. I came in with a cohort of attorneys and other energy professionals that I met while I was at the University of Wyoming, and still practice with and work with them all the time, which is a really, really great thing to have in a career. And I'd expect Fred has often seen that as well as kind of a unique thing about the University of Wyoming and its energy programs.
Yeah, Jake, that's an excellent point you bring up. The fact that coming out of that University of Wyoming program, partially because it's small and partially because the state of Wyoming is so integrated within the various industries, you bump into them, you engage with them. I hired an alum from the University of Wyoming's program a month ago to do some work that I would have had an intern do, but they changed my schedule on me. And it was a simple process because I reached out to him, and he was a former intern for us, so he knew exactly what we were looking to do. So having that smaller group and that closeness definitely provides some wonderful opportunities for the graduates who work in the state and to some extent outside the state.
Well, thank you all for going down that road. I think we work really hard to give our students opportunities to engage with industry. Of course, the conference is one opportunity. We have experiential learning that Kendall mentioned, where students are going and visiting real energy sites across the state, sometimes beyond. And we also, this summer, we're offering a broader week-long experiential learning class where students will get to go into even more depth at some different energy sites. But I appreciate the value of that experience. I guess I didn't realize how those connections really can start to build a foundation of collaborators and partners that you can work with throughout your career. So, Fred, as a graduate of the PLM program, what would your advice be to students who might be thinking about the program, who might be considering it? So prior to having enrolled in it, what would you say to those who might be considering it? And how did your education here prepare you for your career at Peabody?
Well, thanks, Holly. Yeah, so coming out of the first class, the three of us were somewhat of a guinea pig, for lack of a better way of explaining it, this new PLM program and the academic rigor that the University of Wyoming puts into it. I would say that is probably the key differentiator that sets University of Wyoming's PLM program and SCER's PLM program outside of the others within the industry. It is the engagement with the engineering, with the law, with the business, versus the others that have much more of a business focus and a PLM kind of stacked on top. These kids that are coming out of this program nowadays, they can talk to an engineer and they understand what the engineer is saying. They can talk to the geologists. They can step on a well site or in a mine planning meeting and know, not necessarily to the depth that the specialists in there know, but they at least know enough to ask the questions. And in my case, that was absolutely critical. When I came to work for Peabody, I'd had about a 2-year break where I was basically doing commercial real estate. And I was able to walk in because of the rigor of that academics, sat down, and in one of my first meetings with what was my VP at the time, we started discussing fairly in-depth mining plans, dealing with slopes, et cetera, et cetera. And without that background and understanding the mathematics and some of the engineering that went into geology that goes into the program at UW, I don't know that I would have been able to have that conversation as successfully as I did. From a perspective of students entering the program or in the program and attending and the things that would be valuable, I would say get as much breadth as possible. If there's a GIS certificate and you've got the ability I know there is a GIS certificate. If you've got the ability to go after it, go after it. If there are other things that you think are of interest and there's programs that you could take a look at, the CCUS is another one. I think that even if you're not going into CCUS specific, but if you're a surface landman working for any of the companies or even an independent, you need to understand that component pretty in depth to be able to do solid negotiations with the other landowners or even government agencies. So I think combination of the depth and then the ability to get as breadth as possible, as wide an education program as possible out of your time there would be of huge benefit.
And I want to acknowledge Peabody has been an incredible supporter of the School of Energy Resources and has been financially supporting different research projects and also the CCUS certificate through an excellence fund that they've created. And I do want to emphasize that whether or not you're in SCER's undergraduate program, we're talking a lot about our professional land management program. That's a BS underdegree, so Bachelor of Science. But there's also these certificates that you can add on top, lots of specialties. Those are open to students across the University of Wyoming and beyond. You don't have to be a full-time student here to enroll in some of those certificates. And we're always growing that. So we have one in land administration. We have one in CCUS, carbon capture, use, and storage. And we're looking at one in nuclear. So always trying to expand those offerings. And those really are in collaboration with other colleges across the university and very, very multidisciplinary. So giving that broad base of academic offerings. So Fred, I want to go back to you for a second. And as a veteran, you chose the PLM program at SCER because of how the GI Bill applied. Can you tell us more about that experience?
Sure. So I have to say that the University of Wyoming is a huge supporter of veterans and veteran learning. In addition to the GI Bill, there's other scholarships through the Veterans Commission that are opportunities. I have to say that I had huge support in one, determining that this was the program. The VA was a little hesitant to put a disabled vet into a few of the programs that I wanted to go into, nursing specifically, for fear of furthering injury and other things. And they pushed me towards the School of Energy Resources because of its strong support within industry. And at the time, I was a little frustrated, to be honest, but I probably should give that man a hug because it turned out to be probably the best thing that's ever happened. Because from an educational perspective, because the PLM program didn't exist when I entered the school. I was in the air and water concentration, and when the PLM program became available, it just made sense. I was looking at law school anyway. And, had we had the 3x3 program available back then, I probably would have jumped on it. But The PLM program to me appealed from the aspect that it would give me that law school light type education that would, allow me to know whether law school was a future for me. And in my path through, it just worked out. But I have to give a huge shout out to the school, not just the School of Energy Resources, but University of Wyoming's Veterans Services Center. Marty Martinez put a lot of effort into that, and they've got a huge following and a wonderful series of programs and assistance available to veterans at the University of Wyoming.
That's good to know. I've never heard that story before. So thanks for sharing that. Jake, the land profession or landman profession is one with special protections for engaging in land work that traditionally blurs the line between practicing law and the regulation of the legal profession. I think in Wyoming, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think in Wyoming, landmen are actually considered practicing law. And I think you were involved with developing a landman exception to Wyoming's definition of practicing law. So can you tell us more about that? Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell us more about that, any nuances around the profession and how it fits into newer activities that we've talked about, like carbon capture and storage, nuclear, and more.
Sure. And then I think you're spot on. It's a great question, Holly, because landman as a profession, land professionals do engage in certain legal aspects. So there's necessarily an overlap between law and land. That's part of the career. Certainly land's more and looking at a lot of other things, but those legal components are so critical to a land career. And what really happened in Wyoming was about a decade ago, the Wyoming State Bar and the Supreme Court of Wyoming developed and revised some rules in the attorney rules governing our practice. And that includes a definition of practice of law. And some of the items that fall under that definition of practice of law include the drafting of pleadings or other documents, like legal documents, or performing any act in a representative capacity. Those were two items that kind of lean towards the idea that you are engaged in the practice of law, and you cannot practice law without a law license in the state of Wyoming and really any other states. Well, when they did this revision, it hit the radar of many attorneys and landmen in the state of Wyoming, notably the American Association of Professional Landmen that we call AAPL, and its associated state chapter, the Wyoming Association of Professional Landmen, were the driving force behind making sure that landmen as a profession continued to have its historical recognition and role in energy and other land type work in Wyoming. The concern was that this expand unauthorized practice of law definition could include things like the negotiation of a lease or a surface use agreement, the negotiation of any type of land instrument that affects legal rights, like rights of ways and other type of leases. That really is the landman's role as a representative of their company. That's the second path. Landmen are always acting in a representative capacity for either their employers or their clients. So we kind of had a two-pronged area where it became problematic that landmen could be engaging in unauthorized practice of law. Fortunately, AAPL and WAPL have a great kind of regulatory division that takes a strong look at these and advocates for the profession. And what it came down to is there was a Wyoming exception to the practice of law developed for land professionals that basically is acts historically performed by landmen relating to the lease, purchase, sale, or transfer of oil, gas, mineral, or mining interests or other interests related to those in real property are protected. So it carved out a role for the landman in their traditional capacity. So therefore, landmen in Wyoming can continue to do that type of traditional land work. Interestingly, now that we've moved a decade into the future, we have other energy activities and land activities, including solar, wind, and CCS, which aren't often characterized and shouldn't be characterized as oil, gas, or mineral or mining necessarily in character. So we're back to that point again where acts historically performed by landmen are protected, but we don't have these newer activities defined in the exception. Fortunately, AAPL and WAPL, it's on their radar. There's already been some efforts in Texas to make changes, and I expect that that will be happening here soon. But I think the moral to the story is, as it stands right now, there is a lot of overlap between the land profession and the legal profession, but landmen are protected in Wyoming and able to largely serve in their capacity as landmen. The only exception to that would be we do have some landmen out there who also have a legal license and went to law school. If they hold a law license, they're obviously still expected to comply with legal rules as well as kind of a landman attorney, but that's a longer discourse for another time. So
sounds like we could do a whole podcast on that one. Okay, Kendall, we've talked about experiential learning already and your engagement with industry, but I think there's a few different areas that you have taken opportunities to be involved in that have added on to what you learned in the classroom. So one is attending AAPL's annual meeting. The other is the mentoring program, participating in that here at the School of Energy Resources. Well, let's start with those two. Tell me, what do you think, how has that added or benefited what you're learning in the classroom, and how has that impacted your overall education here at UW and SCER?
Yeah, so in terms of the AAPL annual meeting, so I went last summer in Huntington Beach, California. It was awesome in terms of just the location, but it was really cool to see the industry professionals and how much support they give for the students, because I was representing the University of Wyoming, and then there were one student from all the other accredited schools. And so we all got to meet up and talk about how our individual programs are going and how we can support each other. But then we also had a group of people in there asking how they can support us. And being the only students at this conference was really unique because people knew that we were students and really sought us out and expressed like how eager they are to see like our generation kind of come up through this. And that gives me a lot of confidence because a lot of my current friends at University of Wyoming, they're not in the energy resource management program, and they're kind of just floating on their own and they don't get a lot of industry experience. And so to know that I'm backed and supported by not only my family, my friends and people at SCER, but those from a third party perspective as well. And so that was really cool. And just seeing how many people were there to continue learning after they've graduated for who knows how long. And that's something that's really appealing to me as well, knowing that my education doesn't stop just because I'm no longer at a 4-year university. And that's something I actually talked to my AAPL mentor about recently. And also the girl that I'm mentoring through SCER is just knowing that like your education doesn't stop, and like you pretty much determine when you stop learning. And with the SCER mentoring program, that's been a good test to answer any questions that my mentee has had about concepts that she's learning in introductory classes. And it's a really good test of my knowledge of how can I explain this to her, and do I actually know what I'm learning? And I'm just applying that in a new sense and just explaining it from a non-professor kind of language. And it almost ingrains it into my brain to reinforce the concepts that I'm learning.
That's really well said, Kendall. Okay, so tell us about your internship too. Tell us about your internship and what would you recommend it, and how do you suggest going about getting one for students?
Yeah, absolutely. So last summer, I interned with ConocoPhillips down in their Midland office as a land negotiator intern. And I have never learned so much from like an industry perspective and a hands-on perspective. I think internships are a great way to learn from somebody who's been doing this for a while and has seen the ins and outs. I also learned that every day is different and that this industry is so dynamic that you're always learning something new, and that it's not just a cut and paste from what you learned last year or what you learned in your 4-year degree, but you're always adapting and changing with that. And how I went about getting that was just making connections and talking to anybody and everybody, really, and not being afraid of getting rejected from other internships, and just continuing to just step outside my comfort zone, because I feel like a lot of our our natural instinct as like freshmen and sophomores is to just push off internships until we're a little bit older and know what we're doing. But I think it shows a lot of initiative and a lot of maturity when you step forward and are willing to get rejected so early on. Because I mean, I don't see a ton of freshmen landing internships, which is usually just the normal way things go, which is totally fine. But it says a lot about your character when you step forward, and people will recognize you when your stuff comes through the next year or the following 2 years. And connections with current students also pays off, because we had a graduate 2 years ago now who works for ConocoPhillips. And so they knew of University of Wyoming because of him. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door. But yeah, just following up on connections, that's the best way to, I would say, land an internship.
Thank you, Kendall. So pivoting a little bit, Jake, you in the spring of 2024 semester, you probably had an interesting semester. So you served as the advisory board chair for our PLM program here at the School of Energy Resources, helping incredible students like Kendall and helping us make sure that we're offering them the best we can. You were also working full-time as an attorney, and you instructed a spring course. You also were very instrumental in helping our student club get a field trip to the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. So tell us about your perspective that you gained in the spring of 2024, working with UW students and the student club while serving in all these other roles. I'm assuming it involved a tremendous amount of coffee. And also, I should just say thank you for doing all of that. It's incredible and humbling to have folks like you step up and support our program time and time again. So, Jake, thank you so much. How did you do it?
Thank you. And coffee definitely played a role, but really, the students played a huge role too, especially insofar as serving as the IAB chair and teaching federal public lands law this semester. It definitely was a busy semester, especially with the fact that I am a full-time practicing attorney as well. But it was very, very worthwhile. I was very impressed and have been very impressed since I've been on the board by SCER staff, including yourself, Holly, and Cami, on how they approach working with the students to achieve their goals. What I've found as being both board chair and instructor is that we have a special group of students who really have the initiative and focus to tackle training for a career that is so multidisciplinary. I mean, you're juggling so much. For example, federal public lands law is a legal class. It is not an introductory legal class. In law school, no one is taking that initially. And for undergraduates to take federal public lands law, which blends property law, legislative law, contract law, and all these different concepts into kind of our federal land management regime, is extremely impressive. And I think I'm very impressed with the students on how they handled such difficult subject matter and really grabbed on to what is a central part of energy in Wyoming, which is federal lands. So also very impressed with the club field trip. Holly, as you're aware, and I think everyone on the call is, I'm a regulatory attorney, so I do lots of work every month at the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. Students have been coming in the spring for years to observe, and they did again this year. The commission is always a little chaotic, and the docket kind of cleaned up before they got there. So there was less for them to observe, but they really had the opportunity to sit down and talk to the supervisor of the Oil and Gas Commission, Tom Kropatch, and some other employees, including Joe Scott, Dave Chase, the chief of the Reservoir Engineering Group of the BLM, presented to them. And then, of course, they got to mingle with various attorneys and landmen who were there as well. And what I'm so impressed with both the club and the students that I had in my class is their professionalism and their ability to network and step in and have intelligent and professional conversations with our regulators, with the attorneys, with the various landmen. So yes, it was a busy semester, but it was very rewarding. And the students and Holly's employees at SCER make it pretty easy for me to, volunteer and come down and help out with the course, and of course be committed to serve on the board. So fun semester, busy semester, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. As I said, I'm a cowboy true and true, and I will always be there to back up other future cowboys. So
there you go. Go Pokes. We just appreciate all that you do, Jake, and thank you so much for being an alum and for all you do for our program. So our last question, I'm going to give everyone a choice. So just to let our audience know a little bit more about you that is maybe unrelated to the academic program, or you can go there again if you want. For each of you, either what is your favorite place to visit in Wyoming, or what's one thing you'd like listeners to know about you, your role, the place you live, anything about it. Fred, let's start with you.
Well, thanks, Holly. I don't know that I have a one particular place in Wyoming. I think I find joy and pleasure in any place that's outside where I'm surrounded with friends and family. That being said, I have a favorite restaurant in Wyoming, and that's
Perfect.
Bella's in Saratoga.
Okay, one more time. Say it again.
I'm sorry, but that's Bella's in Saratoga.
Yep.
If you ever have the opportunity, highly recommend it. Reservations are almost mandatory because it's a tiny little Italian. It's a house that has a restaurant. But from a perspective of favorite places in Wyoming, family and friends, outdoors, lake, mountains, probably doesn't matter. But that particular is my favorite restaurant.
I've been there. It's fabulous. Do you have a favorite dish that you can recommend?
Oh, the stuffed mushroom appetizer is my go-to. I've actually eaten it as a meal.
Okay. Thank you so much, Fred. Thanks for being here today. How about you, Jake?
Well, I'd say I agree with Fred. There's so many great places in Wyoming, and as so long as I'm outside with friends and family, that's generally my favorite place. But my favorite place for solitude is definitely the northern Bighorns, standing in a river fly fishing. So, that's how I cool off, and that is the luxury of living in Wyoming is having wide open spaces that are protected for our enjoyment. And that's definitely what we get on those northern side of the Bighorn National Forest. As far as what I'd like listeners to know about me, I'm committed to the energy industry in the state of Wyoming, but also committed to my community and the state of Wyoming generally. My recommendation, and I know I've told this to Kendall and some of the other great students, is first and foremost, do your job well and do it ethically. And second, make sure that you are helping to make your community and state better through whatever means that may be. I personally find that being involved on civic boards and obviously with SCER, because those are things that I can directly make improvement of today. And I think any professional coming out of UW and as they work in Wyoming should make similar commitments to ensure that our state remains a great place to live and work.
Well said. And Kendall, last but not least, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say my favorite place in Wyoming is Lander, Wyoming, but that's with the exception that I've never been to the Grand Tetons or Yellowstone yet. I'm hoping to go in the fall, but Lander just reminds me of my hometown back here outside Chicago. And in terms of what I would like listeners to know about me is that my life does not just revolve around my involvement with energy. I would say that it revolves around my faith instead, because I'm also involved with the campus ministry, the Navigators on campus, and a lot of who I am is placed in my faith in Christ. And so I feel like that sometimes gets pushed off to the side when I introduce myself to industry professionals, but that is a huge part of my upbringing, but also just my time at school and kind of what's brought me to the place I'm at now.
Thank you so much, Kendall. And I will say, I didn't mean or intend to, or expect, maybe is the right word. I didn't expect to be in academia. I thought I would spend my whole career in industry, but here I am at the School of Energy Resources, and working with students like you has been so incredibly rewarding. So thank you so much. You all are leaders, and I am so excited to work with you in your last year here at the University of Wyoming. Maybe your last year. We'll see. We'll see about that. You never know where life takes you, but to work with you as our student club president. So thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for being here today and for being part of this podcast and for being engaged with the School of Energy Resources. It's so meaningful, and I just really appreciate your time and wish you all the best.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.